My name is Robert Faber, and I'm here to tell you about an exciting new game from our studio, Digital Misfits. Before I begin, however, I want to individually thank my studio colleagues Justin Ramos, Cody Walker, Robert Campora, Andrew Abrams, and Thomas Beasley for their tireless efforts and dedication to this project. Conquering Skirmish is a multiplayer experience defined inside the tabletop strategy genres that focuses heavily on combat, resource management, and simulation. In Conquering Skirmish, players can take turns capturing resources, strengthening army size, and planning moves across a vast digital board. At the start of your typical Conquering Skirmish game, players begin by selecting their virtual piece and color and determining player order with the roll of a virtual dice. Once these are determined and player order is set, the match begins. A large part of Conquering Skirmish is its unique digital layout, laid out in various quadrants and colors, with each section of the virtual playing space offering something different to the player that lands on it. Resource spaces on the virtual board are often defined by various colors, and if a player happens to have units on one of these spaces, then they will receive one resource for every space that they have units on. For example, if a player has one infantry unit on a metal or a yellow space, and one infantry unit on a rations or orange space, they will receive one of each metal and rations resource. Players can move any number of units to another space, but cannot place a unit on a space that contains enemy units. Throughout Conquering Skirmish, players can attack other players or can choose a non-combat route and trade with them. Players can also choose to create new units at the cost of various resources required for that specific unit type. When the cost of a unit is paid by a player, the materials required to make it are returned to a stack inside of a box that can be accessed by all players in the game. When a player chooses to attack another player, both the attacking and defending players each roll a dice. The roll of the dice is then added to the value of units each player has in the space that they are either attacking or defending. The player with the largest total wins and captures the enemy unit based on an additional evaluation dice roll. Captured units are then placed at the side of the controlling player, and the player that wins an attack places a capture unit on that space. Captured units can also be traded back to the player that lost them for a heavy resource cost, and a player can attack as many times as they'd like during their turn. The player can also choose to seek out and claim a virtual point of interest, which doing so rewards the player. For a player to meet the winning conditions, however, the player must be the last player standing on the virtual tile board, and a player must wipe out another player by dismantling their entire army. The easiest way to do this, for example, is to control a player's start space, thus clearing the board of their forces. Once a player does this, the opposing player cannot create new units and is eliminated. Our designer's intent for Conquering Skirmish was to create a digital tabletop strategy game that provided an introductory experience for players wanting to get into the strategy genre. Our intent was to make mechanics and design simple enough for new players to understand, but not too simple that they felt mundane or rudimentary. Our intent for the overall game experience was to allow for new players to enjoy and understand a competitive strategy board game within a comfortable and encouraging environment. Our primary demographic for Conquering Skirmishes focuses on new players that are interested in similar strategy RTS board games that are perhaps deterred by their scale and intricacy of their mechanics. A brief breakdown of our mechanics includes command. In this game, it includes the action of producing and allotting units based on resource management. Here is the storyboard example of what that might look like in Conquering Skirmish. Defend. In this game, a player can use the defend mechanic to defend an area or group of units from an enemy player's attack. Swap and replace. In this game, the player may replace units or buildings for the resources it took to produce them. This can be helpful when a player wants to strengthen their troops. Attack. A player can also use the attack mechanic to launch an assault on adjacent enemy player units. Consume. A player can use the consume mechanic to create new units from resources they have gathered. Once the player creates these units, the resources they've gathered to make it are consumed. Shuffle randomize. And lastly, the shuffle randomize mechanic is used by places of interest on the battlefield. The place of interest provides the player with a randomized buff when captured. We plan to launch Conquering Skirmish on all major next-generation consoles, as well as PC, in the fall of 2022. We plan to offer crossplay for all platforms at the time of release, and will launch with an in-game LFG system for players looking to join up and play with others. On behalf of Digital Misfits, we thank you for taking the time to watch our presentation, and we very much look forward to seeing you out on the battlefield. Thank you.